Welcome to the Zero Input Agriculture Podcast. Today I have a guest who I just recently realized is probably the Luther Burbank of Australia, if I want to give him a laurel and an award, because he is working on so many different breeding projects and it's really quite extraordinary. So today we have Darren from Herbalistics, a local online nursery. So if you're in Australia, you can check out all of the amazing things that he's brought into circulation and bread. And I'm trying to think. Let me give you an introduction. So I met you years ago. I visited your place once when I was still kind of just settling in here and was blown away by my head was spinning around on a pivot just at all of the things that you had going. And I'm trying to think, where do we even begin? I think we just have to like talk about them one by one in detail. But do you want to tell me more? And this is something I'm curious about too, because I don't think we've talked about all of your background. Like, how did you get into breeding this many amazing, unusual plants and doing it at such a high level? Like, what's that path look like?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Yeah, it's great to catch up again too. It's been certainly been a while. I remember probably it was just when you really you'd been in your new property for a while, and yeah, we had a visit to our both respective places. Yeah, and I was pretty impressed with what you're getting started there as well. I guess yeah. Look, I've got a background in environmental science, so that was sort of where sort of things sort of started in that sort of scientific sort of way, I guess, at uni, which was in Lismore and Northern Rivers. So it was pretty productive sort of area, lots of permaculture and all sorts of things going on there. Um, so that's probably where it wasn't where it started, but it's where it really sort of, developed from then on, I guess. My family's got my family were like orchardists back in Victoria, pear orchardists, apple orchardists. I think they used to grow citrus too, which I found out sort of, maybe only a couple of years later. But so it runs in the blood, I guess. Um, the Williams pear, I think that was my great great grandfather brought that out to Australia from England, I think, from memory. But myself, yeah. So once I'd sort of about halfway through uni, I was starting to get a bit sort of disenfranchised and um, I just wanted to study horticulture. I think I was more into plants. Really started to develop that interest in plants. So I picked up a few extra, after sort of looking at dropping out and maybe moving to Gatton or something and studying horticulture. I sort of stuck with the environmental stuff and it's really interested in ecology as well. So did a lot of subjects with chemistry and ecology and those sort of things. But um, yeah, that's where things sort of got going from then, and I'd always been growing my own veggies. But yeah, sort of living in Lismore too, sort of come across some pretty interesting bookstores. There was one in particular, um, Noah's Ark, I think it was called, but yeah, it had some really good books on psychedelics. And yeah, that sort of introduced me to Plants of the Gods, really was probably one of the sort of first books that really kicked off that interest. It had a really great scientific background, but then it also had that side with all the traditional use and yeah, just all the mythology surrounding each plant as well. So that kicked into gear the medicinal slash psychoactive side of things. Um, Fast forward a few years, did a few jobs in horticulture, CSRO, DPI, that sort of thing. Short-term sort of casual stuff generally. Worked in a few nurseries, and started Herbalistics around 2003. Um, and yeah, probably wasn't so interested in the breeding to start with. That's something that came later, I think, and that was in somewhat of a context of it was hard to get plants into seeds into the country in a lot of cases. And it just kept getting harder. So after a while, I was just like, why am I bringing in seeds? We've got so much interesting flora here and we've already I think there's something like 30,000 exotic species in the country, more than native species now. So we've got the whole gamut to work with. So why not just start breeding things? And then it sort of just kicked off from there. I think one of the first earliest sort of ones was Psychotria um, viridis, which is a part of the ayahuasca, um, part of the ayahuasca decoction of South America, hallucinogenic one. So it's I'd read something about that and yeah, played around with it, did a bit of research. I had been working at DPI as a what was I working at? What was the title of it? It was um, experimentalist. That was right. So I was working in mango and papaya breeding. So I, that really helped. Like going up there and then doing, pawpaw pollinations and mango pollinations, and then just, the techniques they were using and stuff. I think that was why I really loved working for the government departments, apart from just the really applied science that they were doing, which I love. You just get to learn all the techniques, and if you're interested, you just do the research on the side. And then yeah, probably before as well, I just started. Probably chilies were one of the first plants I was breeding with. I think most of us have done a little bit of chili breeding because they're pretty easy. Um, so yeah, and then sort of developed into, I was getting really interested in bush foods, and then finger limes came across, my sort of radar, and I'd been reading about the CSRO hybrids, uh, the red center lime, and the other one, the yellow, the one which is, it's okay, but it's more like a kumquat. I can't even think, the sunrise lime. So I'd read about those, and I thought I'll give those a try once I'd sort of finished up with the DPI and came back and got back into my nursery. So yeah, and then that sort of started off 15 years or so of citrus breeding, which is sort of continuing, but it's at a slower pace now. I was doing cross pollinations every spring pretty much, but I've had to wind back on that just for lack of space, really, and um, just wanting things to develop to and then take them further once I pick out some good ones or whatever. It'd be great to. I was looking at more land, but um, if I had more land, as you know, you just you just you feel like you got to use it. So, and I think I would, but I'd probably be pretty busy as
That
well.
that reminds me to put up my hands if you have seedling citrus hybrids that you need to grow out. And the local mountain beside us is where the Gympie line grows. Apparently, there's a wild stand at the base somewhere. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
we're in ideal soil. I mean, nothing else likes our soil, but citrus loves it.
Yeah, citrus are pretty good. So yeah, maybe we could look at something down the future. I think once I've done those sort of crosses, I like looking at just open pollinated uh,
Hmm.
crosses, and then I think that's where you can pick up a lot of interesting thing and get in that second generation into the F2s, and then you just get a lot more of that recombination and just interesting stuff pops out. So I tend to just let that happen by natural, but I do that first generation.
So let's dig into the citrus breeding first, since we've kind of brought up the topic. So tell us a bit more about like the species that you've started working with and the progress that you've made, and like kind of your thinking and strategizing as you went through that project.
Um, yeah, so I guess I had that thought, from looking at those CSRO hybrids, what a great idea. Just try and cross our native species with exotic ones. So
A lot of people don't realize that there's citrus, that wild species of citrus growing in Australia. Not they're not just from Southeast Asia.
no, yes, there's still people, yeah, just I mean, yeah, everyone comes to it in their own time, but yeah, it must be really interesting when people, start finding out about finger limes and then they see there's gimpy limes and then I guess desert limes probably up there. You probably come across them pretty quick. But then, yeah, I mean, realizing that we've got six or seven um, and I'm sure there's more out there that are going to be, just little sort of varieties. There'll be just regional variations. That we've got all those spread all over the country. Yeah, so I initially wanted to cross those um, with exotic because I'd heard the red center was a cross between a red finger lime and a mandarin, which I think it's I think it was a Rangpur lime crossed with a red finger lime. Yeah, so not a mandarin. So back when I'd heard about that, I was like, all right, yeah, so I'll do the mandarin sort of finger lime one. And that, that's a great cross to do. So I've had some success out of that. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to, as things were going on, I just wanted to collect all the different species if I could in of the native ones, and then just try, crossing between them, say the interspecific crosses, and then also, and that's both ways, different parents, and then also at the same time doing crosses with exotic citrus like blood oranges, grapefruit, tangelos, lemons, and some of the Japanese citrus as well, like yuzu and sadachi. I imported some Japanese citrus seed a number of years ago. And yeah, it's none of those have flowered yet. It's just this citrus is just such a long-term project that takes, a lot of patience, I guess, when you're used to working with, annuals, chilies, or, short-lived perennials, and then you get into these plants where it can take 16 to 20 years to develop a new variety commercially,
Mm.
by the time you run through everything. Yeah, so I guess that's why I've sort of, probably taken a little bit of a back step with it. It's just such a long term, you got to have patience with it.
There's for those long life cycle plant breeding projects, there's phases of different activity, and yeah, you can reach a point where you're just waiting for things to kind of catch up and show their true
Oh,
colors. I meant to mention too, I think it recently was disentangled that all of the traditional domesticated citrus is descended from hybridization of three original wild species populations in all sorts of weird combinations and back crosses. Like it's a totally messy,
mm,
tangled diagram that they managed to put together, and there's probably still some mysteries in there that they haven't sorted out. But yeah, I
yeah.
think that gives you a hint. Like it's such a good model of how powerful this wide crossing and then selection and then back crossing and bringing in another species, like how far you can take it. Have you had any really interesting, spectacular results crossing the native citrus with the domesticated Asian citrus?
Um, like definitely like crossing with yuzu. I think you come up with some interesting ones. They've just got that, so the rind has just got such a beautiful smell. And then you get the vesicles that, the sort of separated vesicles, I guess, because even in mandarins, you can peel off that outer, oh, I don't even know what the sort of pithy layer that separates the segments in a mandarin. You peel that off and you've got all the vesicles sitting there just like in a finger lime,
Mm.
and you can actually tickle those out and use those if you're a chef. I'm not sure why people don't do it. So but when you've got them, just you cut the fruit and they're all separated and they just ooze out like we do with our citrus. I don't know why you know, that wasn't sort of something that was inherited in the Australian citrus. I don't know why. Um, but yeah, that's something that gets people is that it looks like caviar in
Mm.
general. So I think if I can get something that's like as versatile as the Japanese citrus. They've got I'd love to go over there and just check out their citrus orchards, and they've got hundreds of years old, cultivars and different crosses with, yuzu and their haruka and jabara and sadachi. There's just, yeah, I came across a really good page on Japanese citrus, and now I was just obsessed with them. So I was trying to track them all down. But if you can get just that the rich sort of flavors and aromas that they've got and combine it with Australian, the toughness of Australian citrus and our, just those separate vesicles which can be used, and a lot of the interest comes from chefs, really, doesn't it?
Mm.
And it's used in restaurants really more than at home. I mean, the home, I'm always focused on the home sort of gardener, and that's what I really want to provide initially. If someone wants to take my citrus and grow them, and I'm no good at doing things on the large scale like that. I just want to do the experimentation, breeding. I'm more interested in the research side of things, which is where I'd sort of want to take things in the future, I guess.
We should probably move on to another project because you've got so many. I want to sample as many of these as we can. Now, one that we were way back when collaborating on was breeding of Ipomoea, the sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
So the common form, just to fill people in if you don't know the story, is a hybrid of two Caribbean species, they believe, that mixed together and then doubled their chromosomes and transformed into the large, tubered, very easy to grow form that we know today. But there's a probably a 1 to 2 dozen other species of Ipomoea around the world that are used for their edible roots, but they tend to grow wild, or they're very lightly cultivated. And we have a few of them in Australia that tend to grow in our arid zones, or yeah, generally the dry zones. But I think there's a few that grow closer to the wetter coasts. And yeah, we were both interested in gathering this material, hybridizing it, and seeing what we could do with it. I gave up on that project because I found them to be a real pain to grow, and they hated my soil. Like so even sweet potatoes are kind of marginal here. But you have been plugging away at that project for longer than me, so I would love to hear a bit of an update about how it's gone.
Yeah, yeah, I think we did a little bit of a swap. I think I've still got two of the ones that you gave me. I think it was a polyriza, Ipomere polyriza, would it be?
It could have been, yeah, yeah. I had a decent collection at the
Yeah,
peak.
there's a couple there, and I think I tried to do a bit of crossing with those, and I don't think I had luck. But yeah, that was good. Yeah, we've just got, there's some really good traditional bush foods. You got your, Ipomere costata from Central Australia, which is a real, it's really important out there. You know, it's a really important staple in certain parts of the desert. And then there's one a bit further north, Ipomoea abrupta, from sort of, I think that even gets across to Cape York, but
Mm.
it's up through Kimberley, sort of Northern Territory, Arnhem Land, I think, as well. And the other one that and there's a couple of Western Australian ones too, which I'm not so familiar with the WA stuff in general.
It's like Pulfar, I think, is one of them.
Offers the yeah, so that's the one with three sort of distinct populations. There's one, so I've been out to see the one at St. George in Western Queensland. So there's a population that grows there. There's one out in the Northern Territory, just a bit north of Alice Springs, and there's one up in North Queensland near, I think, Lakeland Downs, heading up towards Cooktown. Um, I think so, yeah, and that they're just, it might even be a little bit further south from memory as well, but I've never come across it. But I think there's a few reports on ALA, Atlas of Living Australia, about it being a bit further south around Townsville sort of area. But yeah, that one's pretty interesting as well, Pulfur. So that was another really important one. It's an interesting one to work with. Like um, keeping it alive, it was just such a struggle here on the coast. Like a lot of the desert sort of stuff, they're adapted to that low humidity, you know, low rainfall.
Yeah, the
Um,
humidity is the killer. There's really no practical way of like artificially adjusting
no,
humidity.
no dehumidifier. That's about it, I think. But yeah, I mean, growing undercover, it's just how I do it. You got a hot house and you just have to grow things undercover, and they can get plenty of sunlight, but on those extended unsunny days, cloudy days, yeah, they can be the killer for them. Just get as long as you can keep that trend, that dew off from forming on the leaves and then hanging around, and then you get your spores germinate, and then you get all sorts of problem with mildew, etc.
And
Um,
you got at least one hybrid between two of the native species going. And I
yeah,
think that's the challenge with Ipomoea. The interfertility of species is very hit and miss.
it's
It's an exception rather than a rule when you find a compatible cross.
yeah. I mean, I guess my um, way to do sort of things is, I'll do research. I'll get interested in something, and then I'll look up, say Google Scholar and look up research papers and, just find everything out about them. So with the IPME, you've got different chromosome numbers. So if you're going to try and cross something with, different numbers of chromosomes, they're not, even if might, you might get something out of it. They're just not going to, they'll end up being non-fertile down the track because when the chromosomes separate, they won't recombine into the correct number.
And unless you can help them through going polyploid. And
Yeah.
there's easier ways of doing that. I've seen a few techniques of soaking an MSG will actually
All
induce
right.
polyploidy, so it's not as toxic as the other alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't heard of that one. So
Mm.
I'll have to look that one up. MSG, hey?
Mm.
That would be easy. Um, yeah, so that can be a problem with the native ones that I've found. But yeah, so I did end up crossing. A lot of it comes down to too what I've got available, and if I've got it, I'll try crossing it. Um, and I think that's you can only rely on scientific papers because someone's doing exactly what I've done. And often it's constrained by budget conditions or what their research is looking at. They might be looking for something in particular, and then that's a little tangent, and they won't go down that. And so that'll be the end of the research. Whereas, I'm not constrained by budget. I just do things out of interest, and my business supports, you know, looking at different avenues, I guess. That's what my customers are interested in too, I think, is is those sort of things. So that's what I'll focus on. And yeah, so I did have luck with Ipomea abrupta and Costata. Yes, I crossed those, and that I got a few seeds, and I think maybe even just one seedling that survived, and it propagates fairly well, and by cuttings. Some won't, like Ipomea pulva. It won't, like, I can't get it to strike. It's just got to be grown from seed in my view. Someone, and that's what I was just talking about too, someone, hopefully someone comes along and they just go, well, you just put it in water, or you've used this technique, and they might work on what I've done and not just say, oh, well, it can't be done because this guy can't do it or he tried. So I think it's great that people just keep trying different ways, and there's so many different techniques of propagation or even pollination, little tricks that I'm still picking up all the time.
Sometimes it's just situational too. Like there's so many plants that have grown like absolute weeds in one location, and you're like, oh, these things are so easy. And you move a short distance up the road, and they're just like, nope, I don't want to grow here, no matter what you do. And you just kind of have to. I mean, you try a little bit, but at some point you have to be like, okay, I just guess I don't grow that anymore.
No, yeah, yeah, I find that too. Yeah, sometimes you just sort of let things go. And even with that, I had good luck with that Ipomea, but it's just I found a lot of those yams, they're just really northern sort of species. And I think they were really important when indigenous people first moved into the country. I think they were really important, moving in from Southeast Asia. They're really important food sources. But as you come further down, they sort of disappear a little bit, I guess. Or I guess you get those different ones, like you get Ipomea muelleri, which is, it's non-tuber-forming. That's more out west, and then you get your coastal one, which is pretty widespread, the Pes capre, um, that's non-tuber-forming as well.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think. I had luck with those two anyway, but yeah, as I was saying, I just sort of is one of those things that I tried crossing and didn't have much luck. So it's just one thing that's sort of sat around in my hothouse for years. And occasionally I'll get really enthused and I'll try to cross it and I'll do something with it. And, I might send some to a friend and see how it grows in a particular location. And sometimes they're dead ends. And then I'll just sit there again. But this last season seemed to be good. I put them outside and it seemed to be hot enough, and they seemed to be enjoying the wet, which was good because there was enough heat, and I had pretty good flowering. So I then tried crossing that hybrid with an Ipomoea pulver, which I'd had sitting around for years as well, and had sort of done the same. I'd given up with it. And occasionally I'll just like try crossing it with Ipomoea pes capre from the beach, or bring home a few flowers or something, and that didn't work. But this time, yeah, it's the it seemed to set a heap of seed capsules. So, I've been pulling out some really good seeds, so I won't sow those until it gets really hot
Mm,
again. So they're just going into storage, and there's still some even hanging on the plant actually. This winter, even though it's been cold at times, normally that Ipomoea would be just, defoliated. But this year it's still even got leaves hanging on it, so the fruit haven't fully ripened up yet. So
interesting. There's
yeah.
so many examples of plant domestication where the first hybridization, you look at the product and you're like, it's barely better than the wild species. And then you throw a third species in the mix and it just transforms. I mean, corn is a great example of that. There was a study recently that were growing the first hybrid teosinte for thousands of years, very minor crop in a very limited location. And then just randomly a third species got mixed into that and it transformed into what we know today and just took over the whole of the Americas in like a few centuries.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really interested to hear that it's still going. And it's a great example of this principle of patient persistence that like every season is different. The flowering times, the humidity when they're trying to pollinate, like just whether a pest turns up and knocks it back at the wrong time. Like so many things can go wrong that you kind of have to hold off for often many years before all the stars align and magic happens.
Yeah, I think you do. It's yeah, no, that's a great way to put it too. I think it's you just gotta persist at it, and yeah, yeah. One day, one year, all those things will be aligned, I guess, or not. And that's part of just doing it. It's just, you're not necessarily doing it just for the end product. You're doing it for the journey.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not the kind of thing you can brute force your way to a result. I think that's one of the reasons why like traditional institutional research science has a hard time doing this kind of work because you can't just make a plan and wave a magic wand. The question I like asking at the end, it doesn't work like that. You've got to kind of feel your way to interesting outcomes. Um, Another one that I saw you post about recently was the native parsnip. What's the name?
Tracking mean, yeah.
Trachymene. Yeah.
Tracking mean incisor is it's a sort of well-known, you know, bush food. I think it's got a reasonable distribution up the East Coast. And then you've got a few other species, all across the country. And then generally non-tuber forming, as far as I know.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm not an expert on them. I'll just, I've done a bit of work with the local species, and grow them quite often. They're really, yeah, really tasty. I've had them cooked, and just you can even eat them raw. I've eaten them raw out in the bush. They're just got a great sort of, I mean, they're Apiaceae family, so think carrots and parsnips, parsley, you know. That's just got that, you know, I don't know what the chemical compound is in it, but it's got that flavor, that
Mm.
aroma to it, but not in such an intense way as say eating parsley, but it's just got a little touch of it, and yeah, there's just it's really good bush food.
And
Um,
you recently crossed two of the wild edible tuberous species, I believe.
yeah, so I'd come across not a report, but yeah, just another tuber forming species. So there's Trachymaene procumbens, which is a procumbent species, which, so it's sort of ground trailing, so it'll run across, the ground from the main sort of root. But yeah, that's got a decent tube on it as well. It's more uncommon. It's certainly not harder to grow. And it's even, from where I've had it, growing, that it's been, self-seeding and popping up as well. So it's more, whereas incisor is more those sandy, um, heath, wallam sort of areas that we get on the sunny coast. Sandy soils, you get the procumbens. It's a little bit more inland. You can get it a bit at elevation as well, forest, sort of open eucalypt forest sort of situations. But yeah, I can't remember if I saw reports of it being edible or not, but yeah, decided to try it one day, and it was just as good as incisor. I mean, it's not something you'd recommend people, especially that while there's edible Apiaceae, there's also some pretty toxic
Yeah, yeah.
ones for sure.
How did you
So
pull off the hybridization? Because they're those umbels of tiny, fiddly, progressively ripening flowers.
yeah, I'm just trying to think back. I was just an idea. I was like, oh, you've got to cross these two, because they're both tuber for me. I'm like, I could come up with something that's got a really massive tuber, or, just something. Often I'm not even interested in that F1 hybrid. I'm just, interested in doing it. And then once you get to that F2, you just get some really interesting stuff pop out. So, so even if there's not a big tuber on that F1, then there'll be one that's got a, big tuber, or even a medium-sized one, but it's got a good flavor. And then, probably, you'd be wanting to do some probably toxicology on these guys too, just to make sure that they're all safe to eat. But crossing them, I'm just trying to think how I did it. Um, yeah, so you got those umbels on the
At
and
least
the
they're fairly small umbels by the look of them. They're kind of,
yeah,
you know,
about thumb size.
yeah.
Yeah. So and they progressively open from the outer edge inwards, I think.
Mm.
So one trick I sort of use is I'll just use my fingernail, for example. So I'll just go and press a flower on my fingernail, and you can just, if you've got your reading glasses, or I use like three times. I'm well, I'm in my 40s, and I need glasses now for reading. But yeah, for real close-up work, I definitely need like three times. So I use all that for my breeding work. So I'll use that, and then you can just touch the flowers to your fingernail, or you can touch it to the back of tweezers. Silver, stainless steel tweezers is another thing that I use, because you're using them for breeding work anyway. And you'll just see that, there's pollen deposited on it. And then quite often I won't even try, removing removing the anthers from the target pistillate parent. I'll just leave them on there if I'm not, sometimes it's just a matter of, all right, I'm out in the nursery, I'm watering, that's flowering. All right, well, I got a couple of minutes, I'll just try and cross them, mark it, and then come back, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that worked or that didn't work. So
There's like a progression of effort. Like you try those, just see if they want to do it themselves with a little bit of help. And then you decide, oh, I'm going to come back every day and remove the anthers to prevent them from self-pollinating. You may
that's
not need to do all of those extra steps. So you
exactly.
you always aim for the quick and dirty experiment just to see if it's going to work easily.
That's definitely true. Yeah, if you go and put too much effort in, hey, in that beginning, and then you get, I mean, it's human nature. You just get, disenchanted with the whole thing, and you just give it away. But if you're just doing, incremental steps of effort, then you, yeah, there's nothing much lost, I guess. So don't go all in,
Mm.
I guess.
I,
So I
well, I
tend,
mean, that's something we could potentially talk about because you're pretty unusual in the number of really ambitious projects that you're juggling at the same time. And I'm just curious, like, how that dynamic works. I'm kind of been the same at various times, but I've periodically gone through and like massively reduce the number of things that I'm considering working on just for my sanity. But I think you're on a smaller block and you've got a lot more happening in greenhouses. And I think a lot of the material you get is difficult to replace. Like the opportunities to get things in your collection don't necessarily just come up every year. So when you decide to get rid of something, it's often a one-way trip. Um, so yeah, I'm just curious, like, how do you juggle so many different projects?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think I think you do just to keep my interest as well. If I was just focusing on one thing, you inevitably just you get bored of doing it. Doesn't matter what it is or how exciting it is to begin with.
Mm.
You just lose interest. So I think there's always been that, there's always been that interest in different things. So something will come along and it's my favorite plant for a while. I tend not to, I still get people saying, "Oh, what's your favorite plant?" I'm like, I've got no idea. If you asked me maybe 20 years ago, I might have one or a couple, but now it's just, I love, plants for different reasons and I don't play favorites really. But I think just having, yeah, for working on citrus, that just took all of my focus for a couple of years. I was really right into it. And then because it's such a long-term project, you have to lose interest in it because if you maintain that focus, you're just gonna, throw it all, you probably burn it all because there's results aren't coming in, hard and fast. So you go, oh yeah, all right. Well, this thing looks interesting, and I'll go and work on that, or something come onto my radar. Someone will say, hey, this, have you heard of this? No, I haven't heard of it, and yeah, I'll give it a try growing it, and then I'm like, well, why don't I cross those, for example? I think that's yeah, that it comes from that sort of way rather than any sort of fixed, planning. I wouldn't say I'm a great like, long-term planner and I just sort of, I know the direction I'm going, but yeah, I don't really have a map how I'm going to get there. I try and just get there one way or another and I know I'll get there one way or another. Yeah, so I think it's good to have, a couple of like on Google Maps, you've got a couple of different routes you can take. Sometimes you've got to take different routes and to get where you're going, I think.
Do you
And
think there's kind of a sweet spot with like, and it'll vary for different people, with the number of projects you should have on the boil at once? Like if it's too many, you can spread yourself really thin and like you don't even keep things alive. But
yeah,
if you only had one thing that was your like breeding project, if it doesn't work for some reason or you hit a major disaster or you just get bored with it, it kind of doesn't give you anything to shift your focus onto.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think you got to do that where yeah, not like if you're going to go all in on something, yeah, it's um, I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Did you want to talk about any other breeding projects? Because there's probably more of them that I've haven't had on my radar. Like, are there other major things you are working on that you want to dive into?
Um, just trying to think like yeah, like I guess psychedelics, medicinals are sort of another thing. They've always been a big part of what I do. I think they're just another part of the pharmacopoeia that, just they're for just different ailments. There shouldn't be a stigma behind using them in the right context. And yeah, I mean this interest has increased in those lately, and it's a bit of a gold rush sort of situation, I think
Mm.
a lot of these companies just coming in expecting to, make a lot of money and, with new products. But I think my my role, is, because you can work legally with them, um, in this sort of setting, just for propagation purposes, um, with a lot of them. So that's probably a big part. So the psychotrias that I've been breeding for, I've probably been breeding those for about, I don't know, coming up to 20 years, I guess.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that was that other part of ayahuasca, the Psychotria viridis, that I'd crossed with Psychotria carthaginensis. So both South American species, both used in ayahuasca, but one's been reported to be devoid of alkaloids, the carthaginensis, whereas the viridis is rich in dimethyltryptamine, DMT. So yeah,
And we have native psychotrias as well in Australia, I believe.
yeah, it's one of the largest genera in the Rubiaceae from memory. I can't remember. It's something like, it's getting up towards 2,000 species, but now they're all sort of getting pulled apart by taxonomists,
Mm.
put into different genera. But we've got 10 plus out here. Like this, if you look on some of the botany websites, there's still a lot of undescribed species. So they'll just be SP after the name, and then the locality where the type specimen was collected. So yeah, we've got a lot of those, and even um, within the local sort of Psychotria liniceroides is one. There's really big variation in that species as well.
It's
Um,
really interesting how few medicinal plants have been deliberately bred in history. Like opium goes way back as being steered in that direction, not just for seeds on the top of muffins. And within the last probably 50 years, there's been a transformation of marijuana as a medicinal plant, going from something that was completely foreign to the culture and then demonized and now embraced after everyone realizes what it can do in the right hands. And yeah, I love the idea that drinking coffee from the Rubiaceae transformed the West, like the coffee houses and the intellectual activity that was spurred from all of that manic energy. And maybe in 200 years' time, office workers will be having like a cup of ayahuasca before they sit down at their terminals to get them through a stressful day in the office.
yeah, stressful day. I think you'd have to be working from home. Uh, it's probably not. But yeah, I mean that's it. I mean they're I guess that's why they're regarded as they are amongst, authorities and the West is just agents of change, I guess.
Mm.
Personal change, potentially change in society. I think, we definitely, we've got change coming, there's change, you get a lot of mental illness um and other illness and they're a, they're an aspect of change coming, something's not right. So I think we should embrace them and, allow people to experiment with them. Um, I certainly want to, and I do experiment with growing them and breeding them because I think that's, they're basically I want to say they're undomesticated. Maybe not in the case of Psychotria viridis, but I mean, ayahuasca goes back, we're only looking at, 1,000 years perhaps or
Hmm.
more from what I've read. So it's relatively, you know, new, the combination. And I think it's pretty amazing the way it was, it's been developed. And I think it's just, I think the psychiatry gets a lot of the credit, but it sounds like the ayahuasca vine, the Banisteriopsis, really that was how it all started. And I think it is one of those compounds, one of those species where it will, it's informed the indigenous people of what to use with it. It's just one of those, I think because it allows, you eat Psychotria viridis, it'll just pass straight through you, but you eat it when you've pre-dosed with carpi vine, with Banisteriopsis vine, you're gonna have all sorts of visions and visuals,
Mm.
amongst other things. So I think it's a great revealer of other species. So it stops, body breaking down. So, you can have things in minute quantities and you can go, oh, okay, this plant, has this effect on my body. So then I think that's how it was sort of incorporated. I think
C
they're really
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to think of other medicinal plants from well, psychoactive plants from that region that were domesticated. Isn't Salvia divinorum of
Mm.
a hybrid origin? Like it's a cultigen. It's like a weird clone that they have no idea where it came from, and it's probably some ancient hybrid that's been propagated and protected.
Yeah, I think it was I think they did work out the parent species from memory. I can't remember what they were, but yeah, I think you're right.
Mm.
It's, yeah, it was just and it was always thought to be, you know, like a sterile hybrid of hybrid origin, but it's I mean, you know, most people know that it sets, you know, seeds. Quite often these things it's just the lack of pollinator
Yeah, yeah.
move things, you know, sometimes the pollinators change or
Or
maybe they
the humidity is slightly wrong at the wrong time. That can have an
yeah.
impact too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and maybe with, you know, recently developed hybrids, maybe there isn't the right pollinator, especially when they're so specialized like salvias.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You got to have the right shape of hummingbird to do
Yeah,
it.
and yeah, like with those, you know, you'll something right just pops into that corolla tube, and then it'll just pop those anthers out onto the head of whatever it is, and then that'll move on to the next. It'll have that little dusting of pollen on its head, and it'll just move on to the next
Mm,
layer, and there's pollination. So maybe the pollinator hadn't been developed for salvia, but it's yeah, it was definitely not sterile.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Any other breeding projects before we move on to other areas?
So yeah, just I guess sticking with those psychoactives, yeah, like so there is a Banisteriopsis carpi, the ayahuasca vine. So I've successfully. It's really hard to get seed out here to develop naturally. So I did try some cross pollination between two different cultivars that I'd had from different regions. One sort of from Peruvian Amazon and one from sort of Brazilian Amazon. So different regions, and then you know they got different names and they are, you know, morphologically slightly different and chemically, yeah, they, you know, we've had them analyzed legally with Nickham in Sydney. Um, and you know they're all show a range of, you know, the main Harmala alkaloids. So yeah, I was interested in crossing those. So it was one of those things that yeah, it flowers at a certain time of year and number of years I've tried it and I've never had any luck. And then last year I tried it. I think as my skills get a bit better too, it becomes a bit more possible sometimes. After you've been observing things for a while too, that can help. So last year I had luck with that, and yeah, I got about you know, it was under 20 seed anyway, but I've got about 13 plants that are over a year old and doing really well. But I want to, you know, get those looked at. I think, you know, we might be able to pull one or two, you know, new cultivars out of there. You know, not necessarily high alkaloid strains, but in general, that's probably what you're looking at because that's what people, you know, certain alkaloids, you know, might be higher in antidepressant activity, for example. Then, you know, harmine is slightly, you know, main chemicals are like harmine, harmaline, and tetrahydroharmine. From memory, I think tetrahydroharmine. I don't think it's harmaline. Yeah, tetrahydroharmine or harmaline. I can't remember. Is has more like a stronger antidepressant effect. So, you know, I think that's something, you know, they want to. It'll be another one of those long terms because it's such a long term
Yeah.
uh, plant.
Have you noticed, this is a good example. Often you'll have a particular species that you'll acquire as like plants, often half shaken to death in the mail when they turn up. And you'll be able to keep them alive with careful conditions. But when you get them through that first sexual reproduction under your conditions, have you often seen that something flips inside them and suddenly they grow like they belong, whereas before they were kind of hanging on and not feeling completely at home?
Definitely. Yeah. 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 All the time. Yeah. That's whether it's whether it was how they were treated, where they came from, or yeah, like and it's what happens. I mean, when I was uni, a major project was on weeds. I was sort of interested in, sort of weed biology, and um, so I did a bit of work with the golden rain tree. Um, but yeah, there's some, I mean, there's what's called sleeper weeds. So there's sometimes there's just something, and it'll just persist in on the in cultivation quite often, rather than in the bush. And yeah, something just flips. There's a good season or something, or maybe there's a pollinator starts to use the flower. Maybe there's the drought, and something instead will pollinate that plant because there's nothing else. And then when they start breeding, the offspring, they'll start using that. It's a bit like what happened with camphor laurel, I
Mm.
guess, in that, a lot of the original rainforest is cleared and then food sources are gone. So what are they, these camphor laurels are fruiting heavily. All right, pigeons just start eating those and they just, spread them around everywhere. So I think you get those environmental changes and changes with pollinators. And like you were saying as well, sometimes there's other things that just go on, whether it slowly, becomes, I don't know, epigenetically adapted to your climate, perhaps. I don't know.
I've
Um,
seen a really interesting theory that it might be driven by microbial symbionts.
Mhm.
That particularly when plants are first germinating, they've got a window of opportunity where they're a bit more receptive to forming different relationships.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm strongly suspecting that that's part of the magic.
Yeah, that's another good point. That's yeah, maybe they've come from a more sterile environment and they've come to somewhere where there's a bit more diversity, and then they've just hooked up with the right.
The local microbes that have shown them the way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's just, um and some, I guess some species too, it's just something came to mind, with acacia species. There's, some of the DMT rich species in Australia, Flebophylla and Cordio. Flebophylla is really, it seems to be not readily, it doesn't readily form associations up here, I think, with microbes, whereas Cordia is very, I think it's like, yep, all right, I'll just, form an association. It just seems to do well all up the East Coast, even from Tassie, all across the country, whereas you have some species you move and they just don't. So, yeah, I think microbes are yeah, massive part of it,
Mm.
not the part of it that we're missing.
Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about all of your amazing breeding projects. I normally spend some time talking about your approach to lowering inputs in cultivation. Briefly, do you have anything interesting perspective on that? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I go, I'm not definitely not zero input like you are. Like I'll make I've got a couple of compost bins, like 3 bay, pretty large ones, and then I'll, just dump all my larger bits and pieces in there and nursery waste and bits of cardboard and whatever. And then, I let that settle down for, 6, 9 months sort of thing. And then, I've got three, so there's always one on the go. And I think I started initially with two, and then it wasn't working out. I was like, I'm going to add another one. So I split one of the bigger bins into half. And then I'll run the rotary hoe through it, which chops everything up, and then give it another, you know, anywhere from 2 to 6 months, and then it just comes out really, really beautiful. I've used it for potting mix as well, just for local, for my, sort of stuff that I want to put in bigger pots. So, and I'll also spread that around my fruit trees, citrus orchard, and veggie gardens and stuff. So I'll add that. I burn a lot of the bigger stuff from the garden. I'm on about 3/4 an acre. So it's a big block for a lot of people, but I mean, for me, it's sort of like minimum size. I'd love what you've got, like I think 40 acres, wasn't
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lot.
it? Whereas you think it's probably a lot, and you'd probably like 3/4 an acre. Um, but yeah, so I will burn a lot of that larger stuff and make, I'll call it biochar. It's charcoal, really. You know, I don't. have any fancy retort sort of set up. I'll just, I've got a drum that burns pretty efficiently, and I'll just let it get to that charcoal stage, and then I'll extinguish it and let water run through it. Takes a lot of those sort of alkaline salts out of it, and then I'll soak it in a barrel with some molasses and, sort of and water and, just a bubbler in there for, a month or two. And then I'll take that charcoal out and crush it up and use it in my potting mix.
Mm.
I'll spread that
Nice.
on as well. But yeah, I still buy, bags of, dynamic sort of lifter products as well from, NTS are pretty good, I find. I'm not giving them a plug or anything, but they've got a reasonably good product, and they've got a good story behind them as well. So I'll use a lot of their, not a heap of it, but when I want to supplement, and especially citrus, like they're just such hungry feeders, and I want to, my orchard, I do want to get them up and growing pretty well. So I'll give them, compared to what farmers would give them, it's I would say it's minimal,
Mm.
but I'll buy a few bags. I might buy 100 kilos, a season and put on those. And
It's
then
funny if I'd ended up on the size block that you're on, I think I'd be doing pretty much identical to what you're doing. And I suspect that if you ended up with something this big, you'd adopt some. Part of it's just scale. Like if you're having to drag around inputs on that scale, it just doesn't make sense.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly. You are you gonna, fertilize 5 acres with with dynamic lifting? No, you're not gonna, or you're gonna be buying in tonnage of, of some product from an abattoir or a chicken farm or something. I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, otherwise you're gonna have to have a tractor, and you'll be out there a lot mixing up stuff and spreading it. And yeah, so I think it's, that's really interesting the way you've gone about things. And I think it's that long term way of doing things where you're just slowly building up the soil each year. You're building up that humus, and things just slowly get better and better, really. Like,
Mm. Mm.
even though it's been a few wet years, like, you just notice that the waters, you might go out and you just see, oh, the, grass is drying out down there, and you go home and, it's just really stable. I think you don't get those extremes from dry to like actually, runoff, basically
Yeah.
extreme runoff. It becomes more stable, and that's what I'm noticing as well here. So yeah, zero. I stopped using Roundup probably. Not that I was using a lot of it, but I'd sort of just do a little maybe spot spray here and there, or just stem application of woody weeds. Um, but yeah, stop using. I reckon at least 10 years ago,
Mm.
and yeah, it's just something. The more you know about it, you don't want to use it. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
seems
I'm
benign.
probably going to pivot to Starane because it's a lot less worrisome and I'm moving into a phase where it's woody weeds. Like there's so many support species.
Mm.
They've done an amazing job, but it's getting towards the end of their life cycle as better things take over.
You've got a Lucina farm.
It actually doesn't like my soil.
Doesn't.
I can
No.
grow it, but it doesn't like it here, so I don't think it's ever going to take off.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
Mm.
So
What
yeah.
about the topic of like networking and sharing and legacy? Like, how do you connect to other growers and breeders to kind of both, take on stuff that they've done before and then when the time's right, pass it on to the next generation? I mean, the nursery's got to be a huge part of that. Like you reach so many people through having that
Mm.
nursery.
Yeah, I think that's probably a bigger part of it. Yeah, I think that's like I initially didn't really think too much about it. You just sort of do what you want. But I guess, the website, I've tried to, I'm really slack on the blog of late. I thought that was sort of a good way to, just have ideas and share them around. Um, rather than, I guess I'm getting more interested in academia, but so I'm looking at studying again. But that's more out of interest in just sort of moving beyond retail and what I've been doing, I think. Um, but yeah, I think it'd be good to. I think a lot of the time I just think, well, just the plants that I sort of create will be, probably legacy enough. Just create some interesting things, and have, I mean, people are interested, they can follow me on Instagram or, and I generally post on there about things that I do, but who knows how long that's going to be around. I mean, the website's probably a more stable option. Book sounds like too much hard work.
I now look at books as the place that ideas go to die.
That's a good way to look at it. It's, yeah, I think I'm not old enough to write a book. I don't know. I don't have the patience to write a book. Yeah, I'm sort of, I don't know, maybe teaching will be something I'll be sort of more interested in later life. I haven't been particularly interested in taking that sort of route, but that's probably a bit more, you know, beneficial than. But then, I mean, yeah, sometimes I think, there's people that just like doing courses and listening to people. I think a lot of the time there's just like too much talk about stuff and not enough do. Um, I guess my approach is, yeah, it's just like if I want to do something, I'll give it a try. And you might want to, let's say you want to be a plant breeder, you can go out and read every book, and you can do every little course around, but if you haven't crossed a couple of plants, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So you just need a
It's another one of those projects that you can't brute force. Like you could put 1,000 people in a stadium and give them the most inspirational speech about this. Almost none of them would actually follow it up in any meaningful way. But if you had 10 people that you share a phone call or an email with, on and off through the years,
Mm.
you're much more likely, like you probably get half of them actually becoming, effective plant breeders themselves.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's like when you're in the moment, yeah, in those talks that yeah, you get really inspired, but I think for it to stick, it takes a bit more. Yeah, it's just coming back to, you know, being in nature, I guess. It gets thrown around a lot, those, three words. But I think, you got to immerse yourself, and then um and yeah, and just work out what inspires you, and just try things, really.
Yeah. Try them and be prepared for them to maybe not work, but not
Yeah.
feel like that's a failure. Like it's all an experiment.
No, well, yeah, I mean, an experiment is, it's just generally like a controlled failure.
It's a
Really.
failure that you wrote down afterwards, what actually
Yeah.
happened.
I don't know. I mean, that's all part of it. It's about having those failures, isn't it? It's about if someone's giving you life advice, it's exactly the same sort of thing. You've got to fail and then learn your lesson and get up and try it again. Yeah, it's the same with
Is that one of the key ingredients for being a good plant breeder, that you have to be resistant to like emotionally being injured by failure?
yeah. Um, yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah, you definitely got to. It's been good for my patience levels. Uh, yeah, I think you got to be resistant to those things. Yeah, for sure.
I wonder if that's where a really nicely domesticated Psychotria could help make more plant breeders in the future. It can help readjust your perspective on the world.
Yeah, or even, I think just seeing other people do things, like with cacti, a lot of the San Pedro cacti, there's a lot of people doing crosses with those because, I want to say they're fairly easy because they need out crossing to produce fruit. So,
Mm.
you do have to cross them, and, they're not going to self-pollinate, or very rarely. You never say never in breeding. But yeah, so there's been a lot of people, get into things like that. Yeah,
Mm.
they're good ways to get into further breeding or whatever you want to do with it.
Now, I'm really keen to see what your answer is to my question that I ask everyone at the end. If you could wave a magic wand and like create some organism It's something that would, maybe take a century or a huge expensive laboratory to pull it off. Like, what would you wish for? What do you think is the most exciting thing that you could do with that opportunity?
What sort of species you
Yeah,
mean?
or like, and what would you want to transform it into?
Mm, yeah, I wish I'd known you were going to ask this question, given it's possible, because it's quite a big question. So,
Well, even with the citrus, like if you were going to live for 1,000 years, like what would the end goal be? Like what would the final tree look like? Where you're like, yeah, I've done it. I'm satisfied.
yeah, like with citrus, I think it'd be one. I think I think it's good to have an all-in-one. Like it's a bit like it's where you can use the leaves for cooking, and you can they're great for just using fresh, or you can make juice out of them. Just something that's multi-use with citrus, I guess. I think something really interesting would be something that you could use, a species that you could use for food, fiber. I mean, you could probably just say that it's cannabis already, but food, fiber, and other medicinal health ailments. Something that's just all in one. It's a bit of a panacea for for whatever ails the human race, I
Do you
guess.
know of anyone breeding cannabis as a seed crop? I know that use is becoming more popular, like industrially,
Hmm.
but I don't know if there's any amateurs working in that field.
I don't know.
It's tricky
Well,
because it's still kind of
probably
on the
you'd
on the
need a license.
borderline of being legal or not legal in
Yeah.
various places to varying degrees. It's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, well, yeah, out here you definitely need a license. Um, I don't know what the probably even through the Office of Drug Control or something. I can't remember what it's called, but
And the
I,
paperwork would probably change every 6 months.
yeah, yeah, I can imagine it'd be a nightmare. And then just the logistics of having, CCTV, closed circuit, security cameras and fencing and whatever. I think it's just designed to put, smaller teams and growers off and keep it within the larger industrial complex, like most things that Australia does.
Mm.
I did find someone on Instagram. He was doing his PhD in SA, South Australia, on breeding new hemp varieties. I think I wrote to him, but yeah, I don't think I got a reply from him. He probably gets a lot of inquiries, but he had some really, he was just planning out thousands and thousands of of seedlings, and there was just the phenotypical variation. It was just huge. So
Mm.
yeah, so there are definitely people interested in it,
Are there
and
any obscure native plants that you think deserve TLC, that they just need to find the right person to fall in love with them and breed them and transform them into something amazing?
uh, yeah, yeah, I think because a lot of our bush foods are, I'll just start with bush foods, I guess. One I always wanted to do was like Davison's plum. I was just like, why hasn't anyone done work with that? I mean, I know some growers down in northern New South Wales. I was just curious why.
Because there's
why-
three quite distinct species, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not fully up on the taxonomy of them, but yeah, there's definitely three. Because I've a few years ago, I was just like, maybe I'll get into it. So I bought the other two that I didn't have, and I've got them in the ground, but they're just tiny still. So
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, I've got them. I think that'd be really great. I mean, they're pretty good. They're they're pretty good. They've got some really good antioxidant levels and um, other.
If you do the hybridization, I'll plant out the seedlings because I'll have the understory for them by then. I can just put
Oh
them in
yeah,
everywhere. And they do
yeah,
grow really well here. They grow in fruit without any bother.
yeah. I mean, which is probably why no one's really done much with them. I think they generally grow pretty well, don't they? And then, but they look great, and then you try them, and then everyone's just like, whoa, they're yeah, pretty sour. But mix them with sugar, and they're all good. But yeah, they're a real powerhouse of nutrients. So I think that's something that could be worked with. Bunya nuts, I think you're doing some work
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Remember?
I'm throwing myself against that barrier, trying to get through it.
Um, yeah, I mean they're pretty good food anyway, aren't they, really? I mean but I think just out of interest, I think just doing those, hybrids of, that's how a lot of our food sort of species have evolved. So bunya nuts, yeah, would be good. What else is there? Um, yeah, just even things like, your Tasmanias, your native peppers. I
Mm.
think anyone could just pick a little group, a little, you know, species, a couple of species to work on and just, try hybridizing, try, selection,
Just getting that diversity in the same place is such a rare thing. I mean, look at lemon myrtle. It's popular now, but they're all clones. Like people are just propagating it. And if you want to try and get diversity enough to produce seed, you'd be doing something that almost nobody else is even bothering to do.
yeah. And there's, I was pointed out by a friend who works up in Gladstone, Botanic Gardens, that they'd, recently come across a new. Well, they thought it was, yeah, a different Backhausia, but it looks like it's a Citriodora, and it's quite unusual looking, easy to propagate. So yeah, that could add some diversity. Evidently, fairly similar or identical, chemistry and aroma wise, but
Mm.
yeah, just sort of working with those, just creating different little flavors, because you get lemon myrtle and it's lemon myrtle, isn't it? But if
Mm.
you get something that's just a little bit different, I think it would really take off. I know Peter Hardwick did some really awesome work with a lot of bush foods. He's really inspiration for me. We've done a little bit of collaboration together. Looking forward to doing a bit more in the future. But he's really knowledgeable, and he came up with a lot of the names for these bush foods back in the 80s, 90s.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think even since Peter's done a lot of that work, there's not no one's really taken up that torch and sort of carried it on. So I think it's pretty ripe for people just to get in and have a go.
I
And
added Lamandra to my list of ambitious projects because it grows wild here. One of
yeah,
the species, one of the coastal species. So I've got a few of the other, and yeah, just waiting for the timing to get right that I can do a hand cross. And there's a an ornamental Lamandra breeder
all right.
somewhere in Queensland. I tried contacting them but didn't get a reply. So it can be done. And then
Did
you've
you
got
do it?
all of those arid zone, dry zone Lamandras to add into the mix
Mhm.
to see what that could do. And yeah, turn it into a perennial understory grain crop could be quite unusual.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking like, yeah, because you can, when you pull out the leaves and then
Mm.
you can chew on the base, which I don't know. I used to like, but now I'm sure there's something in that. It's not just carbohydrates or for me, it feels like there's an enzyme in there. Like when you have pineapple,
Yeah, yeah.
there's that weird taste you get in the mouth. It's like because it's breaking down, the lining in your mouth. But I get that exact same sort of taste or flavor after having like chewing on lamandra stalks. So I was just saying maybe there's some enzyme in there that's going. But yeah, I think because they're so prolific like seed wise, aren't they? Like
Mm.
I'm surprised no one's. Or do you know of anyone that's looked into the?
No, they were a bush food. How you prepare them is a little bit of a mystery. There's no definitive source that I can find, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of carbohydrates in the seed that are produced in abundance. So
Yeah.
yeah, and breeding to make that easier to process and all the other properties you'd be looking for. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, a related one that came to mind just then was Garnia,
Mm,
uh,
mm.
Garnia
Yep. Yeah, the
Siberiana.
source edge. Yeah. I thought about that, but it seems to prefer the sandier soil. So if I was on a different kind of soil, that would be the one I would go for in the same idea.
I had a thought years ago, when I was a lot younger. I was just like, oh, I wonder if anyone's ever tried like because they'll look like corn kernels for me. So I was like, I wonder if anyone's tried making popcorn out of them. So I tried, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
They didn't pop. which is unfortunate. I thought I might come across something, but
Mm.
yeah,
No, I
um,
think it's flat cakes is kind of the way that those things get used. But again,
incredibly.
like the records are so fragmentary and like it's two sentences reporting that something was reported to be edible. And yeah, I mean it's a start, but yeah, there's a lot of rediscovery and
Yeah, I
new
think it's
discoveries.
yeah, rediscoveries. I think it's it's pretty much what First Nations people would have been doing. And because, our culture has interrupted that and, that handing down of knowledge, a lot of it is like starting again with just some, basic records again. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot of that rediscovery that needs to happen. And that is that, it's like looking at the Lamander and going, well, they've got they set a great amount of seeds. Can we do something with those? I think that's a good way to start things off again and not just go, well, there's no reports about, using that as food, so we won't touch it or whatever, just, look into it. There's obviously was lots to eat here.
Well, I mean, long ago, the first Aborigines would have come here and seen the first Lamander and gone, "Oh, okay, we've got to
Hmm.
figure this out." So we're ahead of them on that. We don't have that difficult task to get through. We've got a hint,
Yep.
and yeah, we've got a grab bag of new techniques like hybridization. That yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, and we've got that added disadvantage of we don't need to use that species for food. We can just go down to the supermarket and buy, so there's not that necessity to investigate and make something, into a food and try it and,
Make it work.
make it work like they would have needed to do. So yeah.
Mm. Now, final plug. Where can people reach out, find out more about your work, buy stuff from your nursery?
Yeah, yeah, herbalistics.com.au is the easiest place to find me. I've got a blog there, which yes, and I rarely do updates. Occasionally something will catch my interest, and get time to sit down and write about it. But yeah, like lately it's been more Instagram. Really, I'm just really like that. I've been on there for a long time, but I mean it's changing, of course, and I don't know how long I'll be in on it, but it's just to have that visual aspect and just be able to post pictures and then a description. I think that's always worked for me. That's what I like doing. So that's probably where I do a lot more of my sort of communication with with an audience, if I want to call it that, I guess, or customers.
You've got the right critical mass of really beautiful, interesting, unusual plants in your collection, but there's just a constant stream of amazing things to look at. Whereas with me, it's like, oh, another goat photo, oh, another canna photo.
That's all right. Maybe it could be making cheese, goat cheese photo that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
eating the
You
goat.
should check out Substack too as a possible place if you did want to do more writing. It's
Yeah.
it's a very different dynamic. It feels like the
Mm,
old golden age of blogs has kind of been rediscovered a little bit.
yeah. I've heard of it. I think I probably follow one guy on it, but yeah, I don't think I've really looked at it too much. Yeah, writing's getting easier for me. Like I think I'm fairly okay at it, but it's something I've sort of been practicing the last couple of years a bit more.
Mm.
Uh, maybe it's just coming with age a little bit more, but yeah, maybe it's just like I still like the visual, like, and then short descriptions. I can take a photo. Oh, that's interesting. A little bit of history about it. And then you sort of connect with people and things pop up and, they fire things, back at you as well, which sort of, it's not just one way. I think some people and some companies just do things one way, or if they want to find out things, they're like, here, do this bloody quiz and leave us a review sort of thing. They just want something out of you. But I think, it's nice to have a two-way exchange.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Build those genuine connections. That's where the magic, the growth happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's probably about where I am. My website and Instagram.
Excellent. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes. And Darren, thank you very much for taking the time to chat. And yeah, I'm gonna have to come and visit you again sometime soon before the goats give birth and my days get taken over again.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Shane. It's been great to catch up. And yeah, we'll do it in person soon, hey?
Brilliant.
Right. Thanks, Shane.
The Zero Input Agriculture podcast is a solo passion project built with my ample time and meagre resources. If you would like to support the show, then sign up for a paid subscription to my Zero Input Agriculture blog at Substack. As a reward, you can read all my past posts and listen to the audiobook of Taming the Apocalypse. If you prefer reading about the past and future of biological technology, you can read the ebook of Taming the Apocalypse through Amazon. And finally, please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you use, since it helps other people find me. Or recommend the show directly to anyone who could use some inspiration to become a plant breeder themselves.